9% smaller, and that would equate to a loss of around £100 billion in public finances. Now, I would suggest that is quite a significant hit, almost a 4% hit over the next 4 years. In terms of the no-deal outcome, we know the Chancellor has already warned of the very significant impact it could have, possibly leading to higher food prices. The government analysis suggests that would lead to a 9.3% hit to GDP, potentially equal to a loss in public revenue of around 200 billion. On the in-between elements, i.e. staying in the EEA and staying in Canada, now we don't have confirmed figures on this, but PA are suggesting, if I'm reading this correctly, that if we went for the Norway model, then we would only endure a 1.4% drop in GDP. Now, what's interesting about that, if correct, is it is less than the Mrs. May's deal, which seems at odds with what was being suggested this morning. But as I say, that will have to be confirmed. But in very simple terms, if Mrs. May gets this deal through the Commons, then over 15 years the economy will be smaller by just under 4%, and that of course will have an impact on tax revenue, on public services, on growth and so on. In the immediate term, I would suggest it has an impact on Mrs. May's ability to sell the deal, because her core narrative has been that her deal, yes, it's a compromise, but it will protect jobs and business and the economy. The government analysis would suggest that that protection will still mean what looks like a fairly sizable hit to the economy over 15 years. It's a long-term projection, so of course there's a lot of room for error, but based on this analysis, which has been compiled not by just the Treasury, the economy will be smaller by 4%, quite a significant hit.
I mean, Philip Hammond himself said this morning that if the only consideration was the economy, it's best that we remain in the EU. But of course, that's not taking into account the politics. Where do you expect this to go?
I think we've already heard some of it, frankly, from the Brexiteers, who have dismissed Mr. Hammond's analysis as Project Fear Mark III. They are contemptuous of the Treasury's ability to forecast next year, never mind in 15 years' time. So they simply dismiss the analysis, and they claim that the Treasury has failed to take account that the impact of possible tariffs, if we move to a free trade agreement, likely to be a lot less, and actually the benefits of the single market vastly exaggerated. They also argue that the government has simply not taken advantage of all the potential economic benefits of Brexit, i.e. of cutting free from all the social market regulations and directives of the EU, giving us a much freer hand to set our own sort of economic template and to forge our own trade deals. So I suspect in terms of the argument here, actually, these figures are probably not going to make much of a difference because people are hunkered down. The question is how far it unpicks or damages in any way Mrs. May's core pitch to the electorate, namely, my deal is the best deal on offer and will safeguard jobs and business, given that we now know on the government's own analysis it could lead to a loss in GDP of just under 4% over 15 years.
So, I mean, as you say, on these figures, the sort of Norway option would be economically better. What's the government said previously about the Norway option?
Well, they've always been very clear that Mrs. May's compromise position, they say, is the best for the economy. I mean, I'm just cautious about the EEA figure because I've only read it on PA, I've not seen it elsewhere. But if it is correct that an EEA option would only result in a 1.4% loss in GDP, that is considerably below the Theresa May option. It would put rocket boosters under the growing momentum here at Westminster of those pressing for a Norway option, whereby we would basically remain in the customs union. But of course, the political downside is we would have to accept freedom of movement, we would be a rule taker, we would continue paying money into the EU. So politically, it is extremely difficult, although economically, if this figure is correct, it would seem at the moment to be the best option. So I would think if Mrs. May's deal is voted down, it would provide huge momentum across both sides of the Commons to rally potentially behind the Norway option, albeit you will never get on board Leave campaigners because they would view it as a betrayal of the referendum.
Thank you very much, Norman. Well, we'll have much more on that in a moment.